Big welcome. This is the Product Expert Fireside series that we run here at ProdPad. It's a series of webinars that we've been running for years. I see some friendly faces. People have been coming along for a long time now, so thanks for always being here. As we've been running these things every month for several years, so we've got a backlog of these things if you want to go check out the past recordings. Today is going to be recorded. It's being recorded now. You will have a chance to share this with your colleagues later, so you will get a copy of this. You'll have a chance to rewatch it if you want to, share it around, so that's all good. And you will also have a chance to chat with your fellow product people and to ask questions. So make sure that you pull up the Q&A section and drop your questions in there as soon as you want, as soon as you have a question. Don't wait till the very, very end, because I often end up running out of time. So drop them in as soon as you've got them. We're going to be talking about how to build a customer-focused culture today with Dave Wascha. But, feel free to drop in questions of all sorts of product management nature here today, and we'll do our best to tackle what we can. These webinars are always with a focus on the experts that we bring in. So it's always with a focus on the experience and the learning that these experts bring from their years of experience as product leaders. It's always a mixture of either presentations or firesides. Today is going to be a fireside. It's going to be me and Dave chatting. And as I said, it is going to be recorded. You will have a chance to ask questions. So jump in there, get your questions ready. And yeah, let's get started. Now, before we get too deep, I want to give you a chance to hear a little bit about what we do here at ProdPad. Anybody in the chat already using ProdPad or is curious about using ProdPad? If you haven't tried it already, I can see some hands going up. Awesome, thanks. ProdPad is a tool that myself and my co-founder Simon built when we were product managers ourselves, and we just needed a tool to do our own jobs as product people. This kind of thing didn't really exist. And so it's a tool that helped us keep track of all of the experiments and all of the objectives and all of the goals that we're trying to hit, and a way to communicate with our team about what we were trying to do in product management. It was a tool to help us manage all the ideas in our backlog, to make our roadmap, to manage our OKRs, to collect all the feedback from our customers. And we made it available to other product people, and it's now being used by thousands of teams around the world. It's actually free to try. There's a free trial. You can jump in. You don't need a credit card. We even have a sandbox version of ProdPad. The sandbox is brilliant because it's basically a version of ProdPad. Again, it's free. You can just jump in and start playing with it. And it has example data already preloaded in there. So if you want to see how things like a now, next, later roadmap looks, if you want to see how good OKRs fit within a roadmap, see how it looks with a big backlog, you can basically jump in, move stuff around, play with it, show it to your colleagues, that sort of thing, and really get a feel for it in that sense. And our team is made up of product people. It was founded by a couple of product people. We're a couple of the product people. Myself and Simon are also the founders of Mind the Product. So we've always been surrounded by product geeks, really. And our team is made up of product people. And so jump in, give it a try. We'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear what's working, what's not working. We live and die by your feedback. So let us know, and we'll go from there. On that note, we're always shipping new stuff. We do new releases every week, sometimes twice a week, and we have done for a decade. It's really impressive what our team can pull off. And so some of the newest stuff that we've pulled off is our AI work. I was just telling Dave about some of the newest stuff that is coming around the pipeline, but one that's shipped is the AI coaching tool. So in ProdPad, there's a space to capture your product vision, but the AI component of it is something that you can use to help you give feedback on that vision. And once you've actually got feedback on that vision, it gives you input as to whether you should improve it, whether there's things that you could do to make it better. And once you've got a better and better vision, that vision is used in the AI tool to help you figure out as to whether ideas in your backlog match up well with that vision. So are you coming up with ideas that work well and should go on your roadmap? Or are you coming up with ideas that maybe aren't quite aligned with where it is that your company's going? So give that a try. Think of it as like your sidekick, your on-hand coach within ProdPad, and let us know how that goes. And on that note, I want to kick off with what we're actually covering today, which is how to build a customer-focused culture. And we're talking to Dave Wascha, who's a longtime friend of mine in the product sphere. I've known Dave, I guess, since like early days of the mind the product world.
It was, yeah, 2012, I think, at least. Some
Yeah.
in that, yeah.
Way back. And thanks for all the support, Dave, throughout the years. Dave's been involved as a speaker at Mind the Product events, but also getting involved with some of the smaller events that we've run. I've known Dave since it must have been when you were the CPTO at Moo, right?
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, moo.com. Anybody ever used Moo cards? You always know Moo cards because they're the ones with the really cool rounded corners and like a really nice silky feel to them. A Moo card and you got it, but also a really lovely UX experience as you go through. Completely different than most other places where you get your cards printed. And also then moved on to be the CPO at Photobox and then later on to Zoopla and now spends his time doing advisory work with other companies around the world, which I'm sure we'll hear more about. But he's a product guy through and through and started his product journey, as he said, with Internet Explorer 4.0 over 20 years ago. So nice to hang out with somebody in the same sort of cohort that I am here.
I'm pretty sure I'm older than you, Janna, but yeah. Thank you. Very
Oh,
kind.
take it, Dave. Great. Welcome, Dave. Everybody say a big welcome to Dave Wascha. And Dave, thank you so much for coming along. Is there anything I missed from that intro?
No, I mean, we'll see where we go. I mean, I was at Moo. I was obviously at Microsoft for a long time, then
Oh, that's
Moo.
right. Yeah.
And then I did a stint at TravelX, which is a big turnaround transformation, which may
Mhm.
be relevant for some of the people. And then Photobox and Zoopla, which were all really amazing product experiences. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about how you got started in product management. Like you got there before you could study in product management. I certainly know that it wasn't an option when I got into it. I fell into it. So how did you fall into it?
No, I mean, by accident. I didn't even know it was a thing. I studied computer science and philosophy at university. I was pretty clear I didn't want to code for a living, but I really loved tech. I was always really entrepreneurial, and I was working at a software company in Raleigh, where we see many of our guests are from. While I was going to university, they did a lot of work with Microsoft, so I ended up having lots of conversations with Microsoft. And when I graduated, they invited me to come out and interview, and I did, and it was amazing. Microsoft was the coolest place in the world to work. And when I went out there, but I took a job not knowing what the job was or what the title was. I actually didn't know that I was doing a thing called product management until I got there.
So was it
And
actually called product management or was it product
it
management under a
was.
different name?
No, it was. I think it was probably early days. Microsoft went through some weird phases where they would only hire MBAs and things like that. And historically, there had been program managers, I think, but in on the West Coast tech culture, of which at the time Microsoft certainly was a leader, they started to introduce another function called product management, which was ostensibly less technical than program management. Got more into managing technical backlogs and roadmaps, and product managers were meant to represent the customer. And yeah, so I did a bunch of that for 12 years at Microsoft in almost every division except for Xbox, which is a big regret of mine.
Hmm.
And then I moved to the UK. I followed an English woman over here. We met at Microsoft, but she decided to quit and retrain as a veterinarian. And there were only a few places where there was something I can do in tech and a vet school in the same city. Most of the vet schools are out where the cows are. And so we chose London and we moved out here. She's now my wife and the mother of my two children.
Amazing. I love stories like that.
And then worked at Moo, which is an amazing introduction to both UK tech and a startup. It was 90 people when I got there. Richard, who's the founder, is an absolutely brilliant guy and a friend to this day, and had an amazing experience there, and including meeting Janna, you, and James, and the rest of the crew at MTP.
Hmm.
Then went on to TravelX, where we did a massive turnaround, a digital push. It was a 40-year-old bricks and mortar business. It had some really fascinating. It's the best and the worst job I ever had. Was that role?
It sounds
Um,
character building.
it was
I'm
very
probably going to
character
dig
building.
in a little bit more on that and hear what you learned there.
And then it was Photobox, and Photobox was five companies actually. So Photobox was Photobox and the French and Spanish versions of Photobox. and it was Moonpig and the Dutch version of Moonpig.
Right.
And so it was 5 different businesses, which was, again, fascinating. I was responsible for product for all of them. And they were all at different stages in their life cycle. So I had this kind of cohort A/B test kind of experimentation platform to try different things out in different of the companies for product. And then Zoopla was the last role I've had recently. That was again an amazing experience. We went through lockdown with that. We went through furlough. It was a tough ride, but did some really fun and amazing things there. And then left Zoopla to do coaching and advising and spend some more time with my daughter and my son.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, thanks for that run through. And on the subject, Moo is one of the companies that always reminds me of how a strong customer focus can be applied to any industry. People think about customer focused businesses as either retail or tech companies who are always like raw customers, but this was a printing business. I mean, was it embedded in DNA from the get-go, or was it something that they grew into, or how did it work there?
I mean, it certainly existed with Richard, the founder. I'm not sure he even knew it explicitly, though. He's a classic founder, entrepreneur, and incredibly intelligent person. And but there's a big difference between something that's implicit and something that's explicit, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, as we discuss being customer focused. But Moo was absolutely fascinating because I got to build the product function there and learn a lot about being customer focused. It always sounded funny when people asked what you did and you're at Moo. Everyone at Moo struggled with this. They're like, well, we print business cards. And it's like, that sounds really boring.
You made
But
cool
as you,
stickers too.
yeah, well, we did amazing stickers. We sold millions and millions of pounds of stickers, and we just printed different things on different shapes and sizes of paper. But Moo, I mean, I think it's a great example of how even in a relatively commoditized business, being customer focused can help you differentiate and stand out. I mean, the interesting thing about Moo at the time was that Moo and everyone else in the industry that was doing digital printing had the exact same printers. They were from a business founded in Israel and then acquired by Hewlett Packard. And when I say the same, I mean literally the same. There was no differentiation in the capabilities of any of the printing companies to print something different. And
Right.
so I think it's a really great example of how we did things with the customer experience and with our marketing and with our community building and with our understanding of the customers to really set the company apart from the more kind of boring and commoditized versions of it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. That's really interesting. And so, I mean, let's get into that. You mentioned the company, the difference between being implicitly customer focused versus explicitly. I mean, how did you think about that?
Well, I think in early stage businesses, a lot of the culture, a lot of the strategy is implicit. It's not written down. It's not something that the people are even necessarily aware of.
Hmm.
And one of the challenges businesses go through when they grow is that people can't pick all those things up by osmosis and they don't have a shared history because they're new to the business.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it incredibly hard to propagate the culture that you want. And so being explicit, writing it down, talking about it, I think is absolutely key. And that's one of the things that we started to do is I think it's probably fair to say people didn't quite know why customers loved Moo so much when I got there.
Yeah.
They just did. And so we spent a lot of time doing intense labor intensive research. We go to conferences and just watch people exchange business cards. And then we'd run up to them afterwards and ask them like questions in the moment and try to get under the skin of what they were trying to do. And we mapped out the journey, the ceremony, we call it, of exchanging business cards. And it's a ceremony
Yeah.
that's been happening for 800 years and largely hasn't changed in 800 years. So we really wanted to understand what was the secret sauce because no one knew exactly what it was. And what we figured out over time was, and we took the jobs to be done approach, which is something that it's a tool that I turn to quite frequently in those
Yeah.
kinds of situations.
That would have been pretty new back then as well.
It was. I mean, I was very fortunate to work in the early days with Tony Ulwick,
Cool.
who was a contemporary of Clayton Christensen, and he and Clayton Christensen, I think Clayton Christensen is the more popular Harvard professor, but Tony was one of the people that created the framework. And I spent a lot of time with him. I actually met him at Microsoft and spent a lot of time with him in the early days. So it was very new then. And we trained up all the product team and the design team at Moo on how to do it. And that's the approach that we took. But we finally, after all that research and analysis and interviewing and running up to people at conferences, we figured out like the job that people were trying to get done with business cards was to be remembered and to stand out.
Mhm.
And I think the interesting thing at the time was there were all these digital apps. You could bump phones and tap phones and shake your phone and exchange contact details. But all of those companies misunderstood what people were trying to do with a business card. They weren't trying to exchange contact details. I mean, LinkedIn existed at the time. It was a solved problem to be able to find somebody and reach out to them and communicate with them. So it actually absolutely nothing to do with a phone number or an email address or anything else, and everything to do with giving somebody a gift or a token and hoping that it stands out in their mind when it comes time for them to look for someone who does what you do. So the job was to be remembered. That's what we figured out there. And that influenced the rest. If you look at the branding, even the branding today, the marketing, communications,
Mhm.
and branding, it frequently talks about being remembered and standing out and capturing the imagination of our customers.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. You could see it all the way through. I'm not sure if anybody else who's here today has used it, but shout if you have. But even all the way through to the experience of using the flow, giving the end user the confidence that what they're ordering is in fact the right thing. So when you're uploading your thing, you're putting in the right area, you know what you're getting, you can flip it over, you got a sense as to what it's going to feel like, what it's going to look like before you ordered it. And then this experience of when it arrived, it being like this ungifting, this unwrapping
Yeah.
gifting experience for yourself. And you just can't wait to get your new cards and start handing them out.
And those things were meant to be precious because they represented you. They embodied you and your
Yeah.
brand, right? And so that packaging was expensive, right? It was considerable part of
Yeah.
the bill of materials when it comes, I mean, and it cut into the margins, but it was so important to the brand and the proposition of Moo that we were happy to do it.
Yeah. Now you said that a lot of this came from the founder, Richard. What was his background? Was he from a customer success or customer support background, or
He
curious about that?
he was at an advertising agency or a management, like something. He didn't
Okay.
last very long. Like he's clearly not a corporate person at all.
Yeah. No, I hear
Um,
that.
and he struck out on his own. He bootstrapped Moo. He picked up
Yeah.
a couple of investors. Now it's funny to say he picked up a couple of investors because one of them was Robin Klein.
Right.
But he was the chairman. I
Yeah.
don't think he's the chairman anymore, but he's the chairman when I was there. Yeah, and it was just an absolute. It was the darling of the Silk and Milk Roundabout for years.
It absolutely was, yeah.
Yeah,
And it's always curious to hear about where founders got these implicit tendencies, right? To be more customer focused or more tech focused or more sales focused or wherever, right? I mean, ProdPad's very customer focused, but I attribute that to the fact that my background is as a customer support person
yeah,
beforehand, right? Didn't have a sales bone in my body, but customer support, yeah, absolutely got this. And so that's where I heavily leaned, and that's what I knew, and that's what was, I guess you could say, implicitly built into the business.
yeah,
And that's what became, I call it founder DNA, right?
yeah.
It's what makes up the business. And it's good to have a good mix, but you certainly see that in some of these companies that grow and naturally have the customer focus.
Yeah.
Would love to hear about TravelX though, because sounds like it didn't necessarily have the core customer focus. Or tell me more about is there.
Travelex is, like I said, it was the best and the worst job I've ever had. I'm so grateful that I had it. Also, like it physically and mentally destroyed me. So the I can talk about this for a long time, so you're gonna have to keep me in check here. So Travelex was a 40 at the time was a 40-year-old bricks and mortar business, operated in 39 countries, had 3,000 employees in those 39 countries.
Yeah.
For those of you not familiar with them, they are the people that rip you off at the airport when you were exchanging money
Mm,
flying out of the country. Americans may not know the brand as well as everybody else, but they were, yeah, 40-year-old bricks and mortar business, and watching their EBITDA fall off a cliff because their users were literally aging out of using their product, and new entrants into the market, younger people
yeah.
they weren't using cash.
Yeah.
They were using digital products. And so I was hired to create the digital analogs and the digital products for TravelX to try and keep them relevant. And I got to build a team from scratch, which was one of the main reasons why I wanted to go and do it, was to build a product and tech and design and data science team from scratch. So I was employee number one. And then over the next 14 months, we built it up to about 140 people in that team, which is absolutely exhausting, but also an amazing opportunity to practice that kind of growth in a business.
Yeah.
We were the second company in the country to build a bank on AWS after Monzo. We built a travel money card before Revolut existed called the Supercard. We did a lot of really amazing things, and I learned a lot of lessons about transformations. The body rejected the organ. We ran into incredible amount of resistance in doing what we're trying to do. I now have a better appreciation for why that was. The incumbent tech population at TravelX was very much focused on building on and maintaining and running a data center in Peterborough, which is a town about an hour on the train north of London.
Yeah.
Whilst we weren't using it at all. We were doing everything on AWS, and we were really threatening their relevance. I really appreciate it. But I had my desk vandalized. I had my laptop destroyed. Yeah, someone upended a glass of water on the keyboard of my laptop and just left it there overturned. And there's scorch marks around the outside. And so that was an amazing education in transformations and culture and the power of culture to resist change and things like customer
Yeah.
focus and support it. So we did the right things in product. We did the wrong things in culture. That was one of my big takeaways from that experience. And yeah, I think if I ever write a book, it'll make at least one chapter of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd love to dive into that more. I mean, that whole concept of the body rejecting its organ. I mean, sounds like you were trying to transform it to being this more customer focused, guessing a more lean, agile mindset type area of the business. A business is made up of individuals. So where was this friction coming from? Like, who were the individuals, or how is it becoming so fractious, really?
I mean, there's a lot of things that I would do differently had I to do it all over again. So when we started, we were in a old building in Holborn,
Yeah.
and there's no room in the building for the team. And I happened to be coming in one morning and I was in the basement, I think locking up my bike or something. And I looked through a door and I saw, oh my God, there's a whole trading floor. They had a whole currency trading floor in the basement that nobody was using. It had the stock ticker going around the
Oh,
outside, this massive floor with like platforms on the outside. And I'm like, that's where we're going to put our team. It was
very
amazing.
cool.
And we hacked the ticker so we could like put messages on it and stuff during the day, which was really fun. But I took the team and I took them, they weren't physically connected to the rest of the company. They were very much sequestered. Part of that was out of necessity, like there literally was another space. And part of it was by design because we were trying to attract people who were excited about the new prospects of the company. And if you walked in, I mean, when I joined, they had only recently stopped requiring people to wear suits
Hmm.
to work, and I don't own a suit. So
It's a good thing they changed the rules then.
yeah. So we were sequestering people away and intentionally keeping him apart. And whilst we did a lot of amazing things in product, I spent a lot of my time trying to bridge the gap or trying to create a buffer between the two. And I have a much greater appreciation in hindsight about we didn't win the hearts and minds. We didn't address there were competing incentives, there were conflicting incentives. Those are
Yeah.
different. There were definitely conflicting incentives, right? Where there's a winner and a loser in with different incentives. If you're the dozens of people who are running that data center in Peterborough and it's budgeting time and they're asking for a new budget to upgrade the data center, and the CEO and the CFO are like, but wait, all the kids over in the basement aren't using any of your stuff and they're using this other stuff, which is like way more reliable and way less expensive. And having done then transformation subsequent to that in small ways at Photobox and then big ways at Zoopla, I've
Hmm.
definitely led with the trying to win the hearts and minds of everybody as opposed to keeping some sequestered team off in the corner who's trying to do the cool new stuff.
Yeah, I totally hear that. I mean, ultimately, you can end up we can end up with teams who are siloed out and have incentives that are counter to each other, right? So one team moves up one direction and it batters down another team,
Yeah.
right? And one team thinks that they're doing really well, or one division thinks it is doing really well, and as a matter of fact, is at odds with the other one, right? It's like speed of execution has gone up here, and yet quality is tanked over
Yep.
here,
Yep.
right? And lots of different sort of levers like that can go up and down. But ultimately, it's about the business performing. So, how do you get the team pointing at what or understanding what's important at the business level so that they can see that it's not about whether this team wins or this team loses? It's about how the business itself performs so that the team stops cannibalizing itself, which is often what happens here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we come back to like since becoming a coach and an advisor over the last 18 months, like my biggest theme with everybody I work with, whether it's small, a 3-person company or a 4,500 person company, is making the implicit explicit, like saying things out loud, writing them down, because I don't think anyone sets out when doing a transformation to say, you know what, we should make it so that the commercial team and the product team are designed to hate each other, and have fights all the time. Like, I don't really believe that anyone sets out to do that. But because you're not making a lot of these things like incentives, like motivations, like priorities explicit in many cases, or if you do, you're burying it in the bullshit OKR, like 17 KRs deep in an OKR process, like then it becomes massively challenging. So making the implicit explicit is one thing, right? Which is writing these things down and acknowledging, like at the outset of any kind of shift in one of the hardest things to do is get a group of humans to behave differently. And
Mm.
when you set out to do that, like at the outset, it's incredibly difficult to get people aligned because you're trying to do something different. So you have new incentives and new behaviors that you want. And making at least acknowledging, hey, we understand that there is tension or these are competing. We need to resolve them, but at least for now, let's acknowledge them. It's incredibly important. So the chief commercial officer and I at Zoopla, we stopped having individual one-on-ones with the CEO. We marched into his office one day. He was like, look, we're both hearing different things. And so we are just going to have our two-on-one with you so that
Perfect.
we are all on the same page. And he wasn't doing it intentionally at all. He was a brilliant guy.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that tension comes down to, you say, how do you get kind of people aligned on the same page? The tension, I believe, comes down to time horizons. So different functions are optimizing or accountable for or under pressure for different time horizons. So sales and marketing they're definitely on a 65-day time horizon, but they're probably on a quarterly time horizon, in some cases on a monthly time horizon.
Yeah.
And so the decisions and the trade-offs that they're making are on a pretty short time horizon. Product, in some companies, product is accountable for growth. And if you want to drive true growth, you have to consider time horizons that are further out than a few quarters or a year. You have to make investments that you might not realize the returns from for 12, 18, 24, 36 months. Tech teams have even longer time horizons that they need to consider, right? Because they might have significant technology projects like single sign-on or some cybersecurity initiatives and things like that they are accountable and responsible for. And so you've got different functions optimizing for different timelines and different time horizons, and they all get together to try and decide what to do next. And then everyone's just walks away frustrated and pissed off, and everyone's surprised and doesn't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think making it explicit about this time horizons, making it explicit that we do have competing and conflicting incentives, and we need to account for that, making it explicit that we might have at the outset different priorities. Like, it's really hard to appreciate you may have different priorities until you write them all down, right? If you've got a CTO and she's incredibly worried about a breach, right? And maybe the company has a history of having breaches and they maybe it happened on her watch. And so she's going to completely lock everything down and make sure that doesn't happen again. And that might be something that slows down or impedes a sale. And so the salesperson's going to be really upset about that, but it may not, we don't need to, we haven't made those things explicit. And so it just causes tension. Yeah. So making the implicit explicit is the short answer to your question.
That's some really good, it's a really good tip. And I don't think enough teams do that. I've never really thought about it in terms of the teams working in different time horizons, but I've definitely thought about it in terms of how a product manager thinks about time versus a salesperson, right? Like, so for example, when a salesperson says, "Hey, did you do that idea I wanted you to do? I came up with this idea because a client needed it 6 weeks ago. Have you done anything with it?" To the product manager, I mean, probably not, right? 6 weeks is not a lot of time. You've probably done a handful of things. You maybe got a few things out because we've had a few sprints worth, but you probably did stuff that was prioritized some months before. Whereas to the salesperson or to a support person, 6 weeks is agonizingly a long time because in that time the customer's churned or is you've lost the
Yep.
deal or whatever, right? They're thinking in different cadences. So yeah, I like that concept of the teams thinking at different horizons and
And
really being, as you said, being explicit about what it is that they need.
and just like again, I think I've seen that just this take the tension out of the room, like where you just appreciate where that a commercial person says, "Look, I won't make my quota if you don't build this feature." And look, we no one wants to be put in that position, but I think if only when you develop an empathy for the people that you're dealing with and understand explicitly their priorities, can you start to have an actual conversation
Yeah.
about cross-functional priorities. I mean, I've been in situations, the extreme version of this I've been in, which is when I worked at Microsoft, I worked on massive enterprise global deals with multinational businesses that spent 200 or 300 million pounds with Microsoft, and I would go in and do support on some of these pre-sales support.
Yeah.
But the salespeople were really reluctant to let anyone get involved with anything, and then they would be absolutely livid if there was something that they needed that I wasn't accommodating and delivering. And only when I started to ride around with them in their cars and have talks with them, and did I realize like some of these folks won't be able to pay their mortgage if they don't make
Yeah.
their bonus, or they will have to take their kids out of the school that they're in. Now, this, look, nice problems to have, but like real significant upheaval in their lives
Yeah.
because some young product manager like me comes in and says, "Oh, I'm not going to do that. Maybe I'll do that next quarter. We'll prioritize it down the roadmap." Not to say that what they wanted is the right thing to do, but I just didn't have an appreciation for where all this vitriol was coming from.
Yeah.
And they and to them I just looked like this kind of, and if only when you start to have constructive conversations and acknowledge those things, I think can you that's when the conversation really starts.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is where it becomes really clear that by incentives, we're talking about really practical, your bonus, your take-home salary.
Yeah.
Product people are very rarely tied to any sort of bonus, or certainly not in the sense that salespeople are. Yeah. Now, on that note, I mean, let's talk about the difference between being customer-centric and sales-led.
I don't this this is a classic debate and it's very hot right now. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I do think that in many ways it comes back to the time horizons, right? Sales-led businesses are reactive. They put things in the roadmap to unblock sales to hopefully prevent churn, but it's very local and ultimately local and incremental growth in many cases because it's very reactive to small cohorts of customers or a single customer in some cases.
Yeah.
And these are successful businesses. That's fine. There are really successful sales-led businesses in the world. Some of the biggest companies in the world are sales-led. Oracle, right? Oracle, Salesforce, like those are examples of sales-led businesses that are some of the largest companies in the world. So there's nothing wrong with being sales-led. I don't think that it is on the opposite end of the spectrum of being customer focused. It's just a different time horizon and a different strategy for growing.
Yeah.
So sales led, and I think it confuses people. I think a lot of people or PMs early in their careers think PMing, going and doing product, is always the product led piece, and they get confused when they go into a small B2B business and suddenly like they're being barked at by the founder and the salespeople to get
Yeah.
these features done, and they want them to commit to when they're done, and it needs to be done for this sale and everything else, and it leads to so much strife. I think again, I'm gonna stop saying this, but like making the implicit explicit, just saying that, like we're a sales-led business and we
Yeah.
expect you to build things that help us unblock sales and make sure that our customers don't leave us. I think a lot of people would be a lot happier if that was
Yeah.
just an actual explicit conversation that people were having.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
So I don't think that the two are mutually exclusive. I do think it's about time horizons but you can be customer focused and be a B2B enterprise business.
Yeah. And I think there's also a difference between being sales led and falling into what I call the agency trap, right? Where it's one thing to say we're building stuff that helps unblock our sales pipeline. In which case, when you're doing that, when you're building stuff that unblocks your sales pipeline, Jeff had an interesting comment in the chat here that says, as a recovering sales guy, I think there's a parallel between the sales pipeline and a product roadmap that can help align expectations. And I think he's right. There's things that you can be
Yeah.
doing with your product roadmap that can help unblock your sales pipeline and make sure that you're building the right stuff. But in those cases, what's really happening is your salespeople are like your forward discovery agents. They're
Yeah.
out there helping you figure out what is it that your market needs and wants, right? They're playing a part that the product managers could also be playing,
Yeah.
figuring out what people actually pay for. The agency trap is when your salespeople go and sell whatever, right? Saying, hey, I sold the thing, but it needs this one feature. So we better go build it because I've sold it. So let me know when it's done. Otherwise, this thing's not going to sell. And
Yeah.
there goes the month of July to go build this thing.
Yeah.
And then the month of August is sold off to another client. And the month of September sold off to another client. And before you
Yeah.
know it, you never actually have time to figure out what the wider market needs,
Yeah.
whether it's the big whole wide world of your market or whether it's what your focus sales pipeline needs. You just always end up building whatever the shiny thing is that your sales prospects needed, which generally aren't your hottest, best market that you're aiming for is.
Yeah, I think we, as product people, one of our favorite pastimes is standing around in the pub moaning about the commercial team. And we know we
No.
often run the risk of vilifying them. But the flip side of what you're talking about, I see this a lot, which is
Yeah.
product managers are resistant to doing anything that comes from the sales team because it comes from the sales team.
Mm.
And I will end up asking the simple question, like, you may not want it, but are they right? Like, is the sales team actually right? Like, they're
Yeah.
actually right. They're well informed. Like, this is thoughtful, and they're right. We should do this.
They're
And
often closer to the customer than the product people are. So what have they got to
yes,
say?
which is inexcusable, but yes, I mean, very true.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So listen to your salespeople. Don't necessarily build everything that the customers ask for, but certainly take their feedback on board. So, okay, how do you know when a company truly values its customers? Like you go in to advise companies and you work with a wide variety. Any sort of key KPIs or any sort of rules of thumb that you look for in a company?
I mean, I suppose it's easier to see some patterns when maybe they're less focused on it. But I mean, I think a lot of companies focus on NPS, or they run like a product market fit survey, which I think has confused the shit out of so many early stage businesses.
Oh, why is
Um,
that?
it- the
So
the
first of all, what is a product market fit
I
survey?
can't remember the name of the guy who
Sean Ellis.
that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Uh,
the product market fit one, it's the one where you ask how disappointed would you be if you okay.
yeah. So it is, he wrote it, and I just watched all these companies adopt it, which is how disappointed would you be if this product didn't exist?
Right.
And I think it's just so fraught with so many problems. It's given so many companies false positive signals and false confidence because I think it's a false positive generation survey. Um, First of all, you tend to ask those questions of people who have already opted to use your product.
Hmm.
So you're already self-selecting out all of the people who didn't choose to use your product. I was talking with a company the other day and they said, well, we've already got 47 customers out of this market. And I said, right, you might have all 47 of the customers that are ever going to use you.
Yep.
Um, so first, you're asking this of a population of people who have already chosen. Secondly, they know that
Yeah.
it's you asking, and
Yeah.
humans don't like
Mm.
to, they don't like dissonance, right? We like to be social. We're social animals.
Yeah.
And so humans don't like to say, I don't like what you're doing. And so this is any kind of discovery PMs on the call or any UX researchers like know this very well. Like it's
Yeah.
really hard to get people to give you objective input and feedback. So you're asking people who are already using your product, you're asking them to give you critical feedback, which they're going to be reluctant to do. And the thing, though, that I find most often is that they are asking these questions of customers that are not paying for the product. And the question you should ask is, if we started to charge you for the product, would you still use it? I think
Yeah.
that is the best measure of product market fit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think be wary of sending out PMF surveys and getting back lots of strong signal, because I think it's really dangerous for early stage businesses to think that they have product market fit when they have like 65% of product market fit.
Yeah.
So how do we get on that? If
I
we
said, what are some
back,
of the ways that company you can tell a company actually values its customers? And I think you were going to say, here's ways that you can tell they don't value their
yeah. Sorry,
customers.
so sorry, running product market fit survey doesn't mean you don't value customers,
Yeah.
but I do think a lot of companies delude themselves. Same with NPS surveys, delude themselves into thinking that they are customer focused. I think the real measure is, are they considering the customer in all of their decisions? I'm not suggesting that the customer wins and all. That's not realistic. But are they considering? Are they making tough choices, right? There's always a trade-off and it's always a balance. Sorry, that's not really fair. You are asking people to give you money for something that you're building, and
Hmm.
you're also trying to manage your costs. So in a way, a lot of companies are incented to try and do less, I suppose, for customers
Yeah.
than they absolutely have to, whether that's intentional or not. So I think I'm always surprised at a couple of things. One, if I see something that just doesn't seem equitable, but in my favor, right? I mean, I think in one of the early MTP talks, I talked about Zappos, right, which is a famous case study in e-commerce in America. And they gave you 365 days to return your shoes, and they allowed you to order 4 different sizes because you weren't sure which ones would fit. And like all these, the entire industry was incented against the expense of long windows for returns. And Zeppo paid for people to return the items as well, like free returns. And they completely changed the norms and the behaviors of what people expected from e-commerce. But that's because they were taking a really long view, and that didn't seem equitable in favor of me, the user. And so at the end of the day, they're a business that's out to make a profit, right? We always have to
Yeah.
remember that. I also really like companies that have a sense of humor. So there's a business, Wiggle, in the UK. It's a sports business, but it started off life as a bike. They sold bikes.
Yeah.
And if they sent you a bike in a box that you had to put together, they would throw in a bag of candy, because they knew that you needed the energy to, because you're going to be putting the bike together for the next 4 hours.
That's really
Um,
sweet.
and I love that, right? They didn't have to do it, and it cost them money to do it. And you can't make a business case for putting, that's right, Stephen, you can't make a business case. Like no product managers went into some project management office review and said, I'm going to make a business case for the
Yeah.
expense of adding 2 pounds of candy to every box of bike that we ship out.
That
But
reminds me of the Cano model and the delighters,
mhm,
right? The things that you put less investment in, but have a bigger payback. And some
yeah,
of these cases are things like was it DoubleTree? When you check into a DoubleTree, they give you a warm cookie.
chocolate chip cookie, yeah.
Yeah, it's so good.
And I don't know how you codify that on a business case, but so that's one thing. I think
Yeah.
another thing is like, I'm very strict with early stage businesses that their backlogs should be one of two things: either things that are reducing friction for acquisition, or things that are reducing churn, right? If your backlog tickets aren't one of those two things, you're not doing it right. But as you grow and become more successful, I think if you start to have a few things in the backlog that are neither of those things, they're just the delighters. And I like that phrase, but I think it's probably overused, but like I see this like in Fig Jam a lot. I think Fig Jam's got lots of nice little fit and finish features that just make life easier, and you discover them over time. And suddenly like, yeah, that's great. And I wouldn't have chosen Figma for that feature. And I'm not going to leave because they don't have it. But somebody's thinking about me,
Mm.
and I really like it. But that's a luxury of a growing business, not an early stage business.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we've got a question here from Stephen. He says, at what point do you know that it is time to make the implicit explicit? And who does it and how?
I can't emphasize enough how early and often it should happen. Like I often now call like chief product officers that I work with, like, you are the chief alignment officer, and making the explicit, it can't happen early enough. I would take an underfunded, underpowered team that is aligned over a team of 10x engineers with all the budget in the world that was misaligned at this point. And so, and the only way to get aligned to that degree is through making the implicit explicit, which is writing down your plan, not a strategy, sorry, not a vision, but writing down your plan and talking about it and discussing it and debating it and agreeing on it. And then when something comes along that is not aligned with the plan, you say, well, here's the plan, and that's not in the plan. So let's talk about it. We're not going to be dogmatic and say we can't do it, but like, what new information do we have that would lead us to conclude that we should do this new thing? Because we agreed on this plan and we wrote it down. So I was, even earlier today, I was on the phone with a 7-person company, and I asked the 3 founders all to answer the same 2 questions. And in neither case did all 3 of them give the same answer. And that's very common. And that's a 7-person company. 3 founders who grew up together. Like, I mean, what other situation would you think that people would naturally be more aligned? So, sorry, clearly I've got a lot of energy for this question. I think you said it was Steven who asked the question, but it cannot be early enough writing it down and repeating it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is why I love road mapping as a process, right? I don't see the roadmap as a fixed document. I actually see it as a process, right? Your job is to talk to the people around you, collect basically what I call their assumptions about the problems to solve and what they can see on the space, the steps that you might be taking in the space in front of you, and then put them in a space, right? This roadmap that you know you're going to destroy. But what you're really doing is saying, here's where I think we're going to go, right? Based on what I've heard from all of you, we're going to go here and here, right now, next, and later. Just keep it really simple. Make it out of crayon for all I care,
Yeah.
right? Do not get really tied up into making this thing the most beautiful thing ever. What you're going to do is just get feedback on it, right? Make something super, super simple, because the whole plan is to get feedback on it as soon as possible and strengthen that strategy. And if you put this thing in front of somebody and you show it to your boss, you show it to somebody on your team, and they go, wait, that's not how I understood it. Like, bam, right there. Like, you
You're
have
winning.
found
You're
an
winning.
alignment problem, and you can fix it
Yeah.
before you spend all this time making this beautiful roadmap
Yeah.
and running everybody in the wrong direction.
It's so well put. I mean, I couldn't agree more that the point is the discussion.
Yeah.
I think too often in a business, the exec team or whatever, somebody will say, when I want the roadmap for this quarter by Tuesday. And then teams run around doing it, and they spend more time working on the formatting of the slides and things than they do actually. And they're missing the conversation, and they're missing the assumptions, and they're missing the incentives and the conflicting incentives and the motivations and everything else. So I couldn't agree with you more, Janna. Literally write it on a piece of paper with a pen. Don't worry about finding fancy tools for it, but have the conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So just conscious of time, I want to wrap up and point out that we've got a little bit more to share with you before we go. We have if anybody's looking to move to a now, next, later format, we have a guide on how to ditch your timeline. So grab this or just head to prodpad.com/downloads. We have this and lots of other guides on how to do so. I want to see you all back here on the 30th of July, same time, same place. Myself and my CMO, we're going to be chatting about how to train your customer teams to get out there and gather truly useful customer feedback that you can use as part of your backlog and help you build the right products. And following that, there's more to come. We're going to have Adam Thomas joining us. He's going to be talking about the 5 deadly sins of strategy, and that's going to be August 15th. Again, that should be August 15th, I think same time, but mark your calendars and we'll get that out to you. And just final note for anybody who is looking to try out ProdPad, as I said in the beginning, it's free to try, but we also run demos. So if you want to get somebody to walk you through and show you around, hit up prodpad.com/demo and we'll show you through. But in the meantime, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's turned up today and asked their questions. And a giant thank you to Dave. Dave, thank you so much for coming along. Everybody, this has been Dave Wascha. I've had a great chat today. Dave,
absolutely my pleasure.
how can we find you? Is there any final sign-off points to make?
I'm not massive on the socials and everything else. LinkedIn messaging is probably best.
All right, everybody go find Dave, say hi and thanks to Dave on LinkedIn. In the meantime, thank you all for coming along. Dave, thanks. It's been an absolute pleasure. Good catching up with you. Take
Thanks a lot,
care,
Janna.
and
Bye.
bye for now.